Good evening, everyone. My name is Bruce Schmidt. I'm the moderator for tonight's meeting. So we'll kind of try to do it with Zoom. If there's questions, someone may have to tell me if there's something there, but we can kind of work through it. This is the annual school district meeting in Southern Ludlow Elementary. The legal voters of the Ludlow-Mount Holly Unified Union School District, consisting of the towns of Ludlow and Mount Holly, hereby warned to meet at Ludlow Elementary in the town of Ludlow on February 27th, 2024 to transact at the time business not involving voting by Australian ballot, or voting required by law to be by ballot. Business to be transacted at this meeting include the following. So the first article is to elect a moderator for a one-year term beginning July 1st, 2024. Is there any nominations? Cheryl?
I'll nominate Richard. Second.
Second, Judy? All right, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. We'll move on to Article 2. Elect a clerk for a one-year term beginning July 1, 2024. Present clerk is Hula Cook.
I'll nominate Hula Cook.
Is there a second?
I'll second it first.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. Next is to elect a treasurer for a one-year term beginning July 1, 2024.
I'll nominate Hula Cook.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second, Cheryl. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Article number 4. Shall the voters of the Ludlow-Mount Holly Unified Union School District approve the annual honorarium for each of its school board directors at $1,200 per board member and $1,500 per board chair? Need a motion or?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Cheryl? Motion is second. Any further discussion?
It doesn't say $1,500 in the article.
It does.
It does.
You're on the wrong page.
Yep. Maybe back the other way. I think it's right at the beginning. There we go. That's all right. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Article number 5. Shall the voters of the Ludlow-Mount Holly Unified Union School District approve the annual honorarium for its school district clerk at $125?
So moved.
Motion? Who? Pat? Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Article number 6. Shall the voters of the Ludlow-Mount Holly Unified Union School District approve the annual honorarium for the treasurer at $1,500?
Make a motion.
Motion. Judy?
I'll
Is there a
second it.
Okay. Motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. Article 7. Shall the voters of the Ludlow-Mount Holly Unified Union School District authorize its Board of School Directors to borrow money pending receipt of payment from member districts as provided in Title 16, Chapter 11, Section 711, by issuance of notes of money orders payable not later than 1 year from date for the purpose of paying its expenses?
I'll make a motion.
Motion from Judy.
Second.
Second from Lisa. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Ayes have it. Article 8, to hear and act on the reports of the Ludlow-Mount Holly Unified School District Directors for the year ending June 30th, 2023. So is this where we want to do some discussion on the budget, or just?
I just have a question, about the minutes from last year's annual meeting. I remember I made a motion to increase our, treasurer's stipend to $1,500. And Cheryl and I just figured out, we think that was Article 6, which is missing from the minutes. So if you could get that corrected. I don't remember who seconded it, but it might have been Dave Johnson. You remember that, Dave? I can't remember. I don't know if anybody else. It might be a printing issue. Oh, okay. So it could be. So maybe if we can just note that we need to make that correction. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. No.
All right, so we need a motion to accept this article.
So that 8 silvers.
Yes, 8.
Motion.
Motion, Kelly. Pat, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's it. Article 9, to transact any other business deemed proper when met, not involving the expenditures of school district funds or any other business acted upon in the preceding articles. The other business. I don't know if this is when you want to do the informational, or do you want to do it after this?
Separate.
All right, so just need a motion to finish up these articles.
It's just in the room.
Big motion.
I'll second it.
Kelly? Did you get that, everyone? Paul made the motion, Kelly was second. For the last, for Article 9.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now we will proceed to the informational. And I think the board chair can do that until we get to the end, and then we can close the meeting.
Right, okay, thank you. All right, welcome everybody. All right, now we're here for the budget information meeting. Pass it on over to, who's going to take that lead? Lauren or Cheryl?
Do you want to start with ClearGov? So let me. In the slideshow, and we will share with everybody.
Right, the slideshow will be on the TV.
It won't be, won't. I'm just gonna take
For the chairs.
well, we're gonna talk as much as listen. Just to go through the things that we've talked about over the last several months. We've got some terms for you about the things that we discussed, the general state support grant, amount of money in the budget, revenues that need to be raised by taxes, average daily membership, number of publicly funded resident students in the district, long-term weighted membership, which is under the new funding formula. That's how we determine how many students we are being given credit for within each district. And then the yield, which is set by the tax department on December 1st, the amount needed for every dollar of homestead tax per 100 of equalized property value. It's finalized in June, long after the budgets are done, and once all the budgets are in and approved by the taxpayers. So the big news with our budget for this year is the change in the funding formula that was brought about as a result of the passage of Act 127. This is the first year of that new act and the funding formula. The intention of Act 127 was to improve student equity throughout the state by redistributing educational property taxes so that places with an increased need received more, and places that were already wealthier received a little less. So the way that pupils are weighted as part of the education funding formula was changed. So for the last 20 years, it's been determined one way. We now have a new funding formula that adjusts to create their ideas more equitable landscape. Students identified in those underfunded categories who require increased resources are given more of a weight. And the end result of that for a district like Ludlow-Mount Holly is that we are being given credit when the educational funding from the state is determined for roughly twice the number of students this year as we were credited for last year, because we have a higher level of population living below the poverty line than some other districts, and because we're in a rural area, because we have students with a relatively increased need compared to some other districts. So we benefit from, because of that additional category. So we are being given, as a result of that increased credit, we've had the ability to spend more educational dollars without raising our base tax rate. And all of this has been in the news recently. They also initially put in a 5% base tax rate cap. And some of the districts that were advantaged by this change were taking advantage of that cap to raise their base tax rates by 10 and 15%, and then not have to actually pay it because it was capped at 5. So House Act 850, which just passed last week, removed that cap and gave people the opportunity to then go back and adjust their budgets, which some districts needed to do. Since we were not disadvantaged by this change, rather we are advantaged by it, we do not need to redo our budget. We are already in a place where, as a result of this change in the funding formula, we are spending more money than we spent last year, and our base tax rate is actually, for what we're doing locally, being decreased. So just a little bit of additional information where our enrollment is. In addition to the students who are in the Ludlow and Mount Holly elementary schools, we pay tuition for all of our Ludlow-Mount Holly families that have students in grades 7 through 12. You can see where most of them go. The majority, 45, go to Green Mountain Union High School. The second highest is Mill River. And then we have other students going to both public and private schools in the area. All of those tuition payments, they vary up to a cap set by the state from roughly $15,000 per student to $18,000 per student, depending on the particular school that they are sent to. And that, sorry, just to go back there for a second, the three main drivers of our increase in spending, again, our base tax rate is going down, not up. But the drivers of the spending are the increase in tuition, our special education costs, and our capital reserves. So here's overall what the budget is. It's also in this booklet and has been available on the TRSU website for the last couple of months. While the increase feels pretty stunning, the intent of this new funding formula was to allow that increase without raising our base taxes. So, and you can see the three categories in which our big spending is happening is in the tuition payments, in our the assessment, which is primarily special education costs, and in our capital transportation HRA reserve. So a little explanation of that. The average tuition is for our 7-12 students is at over $18,000. For next year, we're budgeting for 141 students, which is an increase of 10 over this year, because we have more students who are finishing 6th grade, going into 7th grade, than we have exiting 12th grade. Our special education assessment has increased by 480,000. We have an increase in the number of students who receive special education services, and we also have increased costs for those services, particularly around transportation for students who are outplaced, but also for our students that we serve within the district. And then we included 400,000 in the capital reserve. If the bond passes, that amount will pay the interest for the year. If the bond doesn't pass, that will pay for the boiler that we will need to replace. So that's why we've included it. Either way, we need that. Anything you want to? Yes, absolutely.
What about the boiler for Ludlow?
Well, at the moment, we don't have the same immediate, we know that the boiler in Mount Holly is going to fail next year because we had, how many times, Craig's online? We had 3 or 4 times over the course of this year where we had basically an emergency of having to deal with a fix in order to be able to open school the next day. We do need to replace
The
things.
Ludlow was included in the bond.
It is, and we
And
need.
it's wondering why
Yeah.
one school and not the other.
Because we know for certain that we're going to have to replace the one next year. We won't replace it until it fails, but we know we're going to have to. And we do not know for certain that the one in Ludlow will fail in the next 12 months. So we made the decision that we would rather not replace just the boilers. We would rather replace all of them and have the bond pass. But if we're going to put in a contingency to make sure that we have at a bare minimum covered the things that we know are going to happen, that's why we put that amount of money into the capital reserve. Somebody, yeah, we spent a great deal of time talking. So you can see on this slide, our cost per pupil in 23-24 was at 22,000, but that was under a different formula. So while it looks wonderful that under the new formula, we're at 13,287, last year's, if we'd been using this new formula for last year, we would have been at a slightly lower per pupil cost, roughly the same amount, difference of about $200. So a small change. For the projected base tax rate, last year it was $1.43. This year it's at $1.36, which is a change of 5%. So it's a decrease. Now your property taxes go up based on the CLA, based on our yield, but not, and I know there's lots of noise from the state talking about the educational budget is what's driving that. Our local educational budget is a decrease in your tax rate. The reason that your property taxes are going up is based on the CLA, on the common level of raising.
There's one important thing in this slide. If you look at the bottom 2 lines all the way over to the right, Ludlow's projected tax rate is going up 6.57% and Mount Holly's 9.32%. What's out there is 18 to 20%. That is a state average. We are well below that state average. And I think that's an important point on this slide. So this is just the change from last year to this year. And this is a pulled from the other slide, but with a little bit more explanation on the right. We do have a 19.12% in the budget over last year. The general state support grant is what we need to raise in taxes in order to sustain this budget, has increased 1.2 million, which is a 17.06% increase on that. Equalized pupil, we increased based on the modification they did. We've increased 15% of our pupils, and that's based on the funding formula, more weight for some of the students. Our cost per pupil was only up 1.46%, $190 per student. Again, the decrease in our base tax rate of 5.18, and then we already talked about what the CLA impact is on it.
When the CLA goes down, the tax rate goes up. So the decrease of 11%, 13% amount is, and the further down the CLA goes, the greater the cost is. So there's a difference between the base tax rate, which is what your local school budget is responsible for, and the property tax increase, which is coming because of the CLA, which we have no control. So the article you're going to see on your ballot, budget of $9,134,520. Education spending of $13,287.45 for our long-term weighted membership. We've been on a roller coaster over the last month or so. Usually we put the budget to bed in January, and then we're done thinking about these changes. And this year we've had repeated changes in the yield, in the discussion of how things were going to be handled by the state for this new funding formula. Do you want to?
So if you look at the bottom, December 1st, that's the letter that we generally get from the tax department about the yield that they set. Again, like Lauren said, we generally don't do anything with it. Nothing changes. It will change in June, but as far as our budgeting process, we don't worry about it. January 9th, they relooked at it and they decided they had overestimated the grand list. So they dropped that yield from the 9,342 to 9,171, and you can see the bottom line impact of how that plays out in the tax rate. On January 31st, there was a huge gasp in Montpelier as they realized what had happened with Act 127, and had they left Act 127 as it was, the yield would have dropped to $7,103, and our tax rate, our base tax rate, would have gone up to $1.87. That's when they started talking about all these changes that needed to happen, and getting rid of the cap, getting rid of both caps that they had in place. They ended up putting in what they call the discount, which is essentially a tax credit for some of the disadvantaged districts that ran into some problems with this. So the February 8th date, the 7,969 is the yield that they are currently landed on, which goes along with the changes to the Act 127, which puts us in a good position at the $1.36, which is 5.18% less than we paid last year. If they told everybody, you're on your own, you plan this budget, you don't get a discount, we would have even been better off, but they did not do that. So
Since we prepared this slide last week, they went through and they passed House Bill 850. So at the moment, the yield is set at 9,769.
yes,
Is that right?
in June, they'll reevaluate when everybody's budget passes. I think some of the hope is that some of these budgets that were extremely high and out of proportion, that they'll reopen them up, lower them. When they lower their budget, it's less statewide tax that has to be raised, and so that should increase the yield, which will lower our tax rate. But at this point, we're going with the 9,760.
Just as we said,
Yeah, the common level of appraisal, everybody's seen a decline. We're in 77%. Ludlow wants the reevaluation for Ludlow.
They haven't returned it yet.
That's a couple years away.
Yeah.
So there's only like two companies in the state that do this, and everybody's looking to
They're all
reevaluate. This is a statewide. This is not a Ludlow-Mount Holly issue. This is a statewide problem. We have no control over how that happens.
I just had a question about understanding the weighting.
Sure.
From what I had read primarily, I guess, in Vermont Digger, There were three components to the weighting. There was the income level, the aspect of whether a town was a rural town, and then the other component, which I guess doesn't apply to us, was effectively English as a second language.
It doesn't,
And that's not much of an issue in our town though, compared to Burlington, for example. Is that right?
correct. So the weight that we receive off of those students is minimal, but there is like a $25,000 grant for 1 to 6 kids, and so we did get that for this district. So the weight's based on grade level, free and reduced lunch, rural population, small schools, and the English language.
So there's no component of the weighting that actually is part and parcel of special education. That's a totally separate line item. Correct?
Right. There's no weight in for that. So this slide kind of breaks down what part of your taxes come from the decline in the CLA and what part of your taxes are part of the base tax rate for this education budget. So with and this is per $100,000 home site property value. So for Ludlow, the tax rate's $1.75, which is 11-cent increase. Of that, 161.80 is because of the decline in the CLA, and 51.80 is a decrease. So the net together is $110,000 per 100,000 of home site.
$110, not 110,000.
Oh, yeah. Because one pay those taxes, right? Sorry about that. And then for Ludlow, Mount Holly, it's the same thing. They would be 201.80 is because of the decline in the CLA, accredited 51.80, $150 per 100,000.
Is that for the year or? That's for the year. So I know I read it was something like that that said,
Sure what you mean.
so I think I read it before. Okay.
Yeah, and we wanted to take a look at if you were not including your local budget, so the local education budget didn't exist. Everybody voted no, or it didn't exist. The increase for Ludlow for every $100,000 would it be $161.80. With this education budget, it will instead be $110 because of the advantage that we are receiving from this weighting formula and the way the yield plays out for us along with all the other numbers. The result of our education budget is a reduction in the base tax rate. That's happening for this year.
This is all because of the change in the funding formula.
Next year, the funding formula will just exist. And we will need to, again, be looking to maintain, not raise our spending in order to stay within the tax rate. But for this year, we get this one-time only advantage to be able to spend more money and keep the base tax rate the same. Won't be true next year, but it is true this year.
We can continue to spend at the increased level.
Yes.
Is that right? But we can't do another,
Could not do another big increase.
so it's not like a one-time,
Oh, no, it's not like it
it
resets.
goes away, right? Okay.
So, but that's only based on if your house is valued at 100,000.
It's for everyone, and nobody
So
has
if you have a
that.
$300,000 house,
You have to multiply by
330,000.
Yeah.
That was easier than trying to come up with all these calculations. Yeah.
Right, just the background on the TRSU budget, which is funded through the assessment to the two districts. It's broken down into the categories of central office, transportation, special education, and tech support. We have an increase in the central office budget because we restructured the tech department, but overall that amount of money is relatively small. The transportation budget has a decrease because over on the Green Mountain side of things, they paid off loans on the buses. But the special education budget, which is the bulk of the assessment increase for both Ludlow-Mount Holly and for the Green Mountain District, continues to increase. This is to say here, we work very hard to try to control those costs. Nobody's trying to spend more money. But we have the needs that we have. The decision to have students have individualized education plan is made after a great deal of time following procedures and processes, and it is a mandate. We don't have choices about it. And the TRSU budget, along with the Ludlow-Mount Holly budget and the Green Mountain budget, have all been available on the TRSU website. It's also the TRSU budget information is also in that booklet. If you need more information, Cheryl's happy to give it to you. You can contact me. If I can answer the question, I will, and if I can't, I'll give it to Cheryl.
Cheryl does like this.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen now, and we have,
You should be.
so, do I need to turn my camera back on? Oh, there we go. So this is the TRSU website, so it's trsu.org. If you scroll down on this website, there's a folder down here that you see Ludlow-Mount Holly proposed budget. The slideshow we just did, as well as several other documents are in there. So you can go back and review them anytime you want. But up here we have the LMH digital booklet. I'm trying to look up there and use my mouse. Be patient.
Be patient. See what's anything up there. It's working.
Okay. So this is new. This is this is the first time the board or anybody is seeing this. So feedback would be greatly appreciated on this. It's a slow roll. So essentially the first part of this is the annual booklet that was sent out. And if you go up here to annual booklet, you'll see all of the pieces of it, and you can click on any one of it. Here's the superintendent's report, and you can scroll down and read the superintendent's report. So this is everything that's in the booklet. You know, if this works out successful and people use it, then, you know, maybe we'll consider using this instead of the annual booklet, but that is actually a community decision, not a board decision. So if you come over here to departments, all the TRSU information is in there, so all the detail of the budget. And this is for, look up there, Ludlow-Mount Holly, and if you click this little arrow, you can get individual information on all those schools. We're going to focus on the district budget that has everything. So I've done some narrative work on it that you can go through and read. But you go down here, and this compares the three budgets for the 3 years. What you see here is because this is a year in process, so obviously we haven't finished this year, so we'll update that as we go. So this budget is by function, so it has this pretty pie chart. One of the kinks that we have in here is that we have regular education here and regular education here. Because of the hierarchy of our accounting system, we're having trouble like being able to merge that all into one. But you'd be able to see the percentages, and then you can also change it to a line chart over here. Which is just as hard to read because it's small. And this is just another way of looking at it. It has the historical information with it, but again, you can change that chart down here. And then you come down here and it has a spreadsheet breakdown. So if you click on this, this gives you the breakdown of all the numbers by individual line items. So when you see salaries, and then it has all the benefits listed below that. So and when you're done and you want to scroll on, you just hit this arrow again, it pops it back up, and you can move on. So this is expenditure by object code. So it's we do break out like tuition and assessment because they are large, but then you have salaries and benefits, and it gives the percentages of what makes up the LMH budget. When you look at the individual school district, it'll tell you what's in that individual school. Same thing, you can switch to charts, look at the breakdown. This document is what came out of your booklet. And that's for the expenses. This is a 3-year comparison. This is updated from what was in the booklet because of the change in the yield. So it's more current with what's actually going to happen. Breakdown of revenues. This one is just really plain because there's not a lot of breakdown. And then this next one is what's in the booklet as well. And this is where our money comes from. Local is really what's raised with the taxes, and then we have other, trying to think what other is, rent for the building, interest, all the small things like that. And again, these have the charts too that you can switch and look at it. It's pretty, you can't see the whole thing. And then this is the last chart we went over about the common level of appraisal. This is the slide that we just had in the slideshow that we gave. If you go back up to the top, quick way to do this, but
Little arrow down there.
you don't really see it, Paul. There's a sprint button over here. You can go through and put in your email address because that's how you're going to see it. And go through and click off the things that you want to see, and it will send you an email with it in the booklet form. I will warn anybody, don't look at it before you print it. Right now, it's taking all those spreadsheets and adding them to this booklet, so it's very large. So I'm trying to figure out how to turn that off so you won't get the pretty spreadsheets, only if you request them.
As Cheryl said, this is our first year using this, and we've just gotten all of the information we needed into. This is kind of our pilot year for it, and hopefully it will be a benefit, an easier way for people to drill down into the budget than looking at what we've had in the past, which is just one giant spreadsheet after another.
Cheryl, that's a great job. I'm not a computer geek, but I could probably have fun pretending I am looking at it.
I would love feedback. So if something's not working right, or you think you should be able to see it differently, or I would like to know if you like it, but if you don't like it as well, because this is a pilot here, so feedback would be really appreciated.
Sure, I have a question about it. Does it get fed from some auto source, or is that source your fingers?
So what I do is I have my data and I send it to ClearGov and they upload it. And
So
then it
how often
populates.
will things get, like as you said, we haven't encumbered those funds, so this chart is only looking this way, so how often will that?
So that's something that we have to figure out, because I would like to utilize this more than just for the budget. So it's figuring out how we do that and what information we want to see. Julie and Emma, I don't know if they're online, but they have a lot of, data from the work that they do that they would like to do here. We can put in organizational charts, and with the bond, we can put bond information and updates, and we can utilize it for a lot of different things. We just have to figure out what that is.
So when people are thinking of when they cast their ballot, what percent increase or decrease are the people in Mount Holly, for example, looking at for the school budget? You have a dollar figure or a percentage figure for the bond issue, exclusive of the bond issue.
Yeah.
What are the people in Mount Holly looking at as a percent increase based on the school budget?
So the one slide that we showed you,
Right.
the school budget is having the effect this year of decreasing the property tax.
Okay.
So that's the
Okay, so
effect. If you're voting yes on the Ludlow-Mount Holly school budget, the end result is for every 100,000 for, and then what would have been 161.80 for every $100,000 of home you own will instead be 110.
I just think it's good to really have a very clear clarification, because so much of what you read in the news media, for example, one of the towns up in the Waitsfield, Warren, I think was projected, 40% increase. But the thing that's also interesting in the news articles is with all of the deliberations in Montpelier, there still doesn't seem to be a clear idea of how it actually affects the individual towns. So that's why I just want to walk out of here having a very clear picture in my mind, that I don't have to try to distill from other information, that's all.
I mean, the convoluted nature of the funding formula
Sure.
and the way that Vermont across the state funds education by this system of property taxes and local budgets. There's nothing clear about any of that.
And of course, we're told that's all going to change in the coming legislative session.
You betcha.
Every year.
I think their eyes are open a little bit wider right now because of this. We'll see if they act upon it.
And having this dramatic CLA increase that is affecting most towns across Vermont, happening the same year as this changed funding formula, which was difficult to understand to begin with, it's just a perfect storm of financial mess. So we're trying to be as clear as we can that because of the change in the funding formula, while we are spending more money, it is not increasing the part of your taxes that is a result of the local education budget. Your property taxes, which fund Vermont education for the entire state, are going up because of the CLA, but it's not going up because of the Ludlow-Mount Holly district budget.
But people shouldn't think that because there's an advantage to the towns this year, that should make it easier for them to vote for a bond issue, because there will be an equalization next year.
It's a different
That
issue.
may be detrimental. Is that okay?
It's a different,
Sure.
the bond plays into it in a
Sure.
different way.
But a portion of the bond is in this year. Should it pass, a portion of it's in this year. And so it's going to be
$400,000.
spread over 2 years if we move forward with it.
I mean, if I can just parenthetically state, whatever people might think about the bond issue, when you look at the Vermont Standard and see that Woodstock has a bond issue for $99 million, it reminds me of the old ads, dating myself, of the Fram oil filters. You can pay me now or you can pay me later. So that could be a cautionary tale as to what we might be facing.
The cost of deferred maintenance when a school reaches a point where you can't renovate it, you have to tear it down and start over again. It's always much more than spending as you go.
And I'm just wondering, is there any chance you could go through some of the major changes and explain the logic under which you made them? What is it, the high school? I believe you said you had a projected increase of 10 students, but the charge is going up 400,000. The difference between, this year and last. Same thing with the maintenance, special ed. I'm assuming technology went down because they're consolidating it, and, your overall cost is either going to be moved to TRSU and that might explain, like food services. The cost of food has gone up, yet your food services has gone down. So if you could sort of walk through the logic of
Food service
how
is
you
the
made it
easy
seem.
one. Yeah, food service is the easy one. The state has been asking us to pull that out into a separate fund. And so it's not part of our operating budget, because if they run a profit, which I've never seen a food service program run a profit, that it needs to stay in food service. So I've actually pulled that out into its own fund, which if you go onto the TRSU site, to the documents in the budget, you will see that I did that. So that amount of money that you see in there, I believe it's $146,000. Oh, it's blended in, you won't be able to see that.
Went down 106, but yeah,
Okay.
because it's
That
probably moved
is
somewhere else.
what the district is going to need to offset what we don't get in reimbursement for meals. So that's that one. For tuition, even though we have 110 more kids at 19,000.
10,
10 more.
100.
I don't like that number tonight. You know?
I've noticed.
We have to do our announced tuition for the following year. I know in Green Mountain alone, when we have to set that, we've been at 16,000. I think we went to 17 this year. We moved to 18,000. But Mill River, Springfield, Bells Falls jumped thousands of dollars. And so we have to add that additional money into the budget. We don't know them all because unfortunately that due date is January 15th and we more than likely put our budget to bed at that point. So any of the ones we get early, we do make the adjustment in the budget, but it's likely that we would still go over budget on that.
So having an additional $3,000, $4,000 for 131 students, plus having an additional 10 students who are likely to get billed out at about $18,000 apiece, and then not knowing that the number we put in is based on our best guess about how much we're going to, and sometimes we get that right, sometimes we're a little short.
If students go to a public high school, we have to pay the announced tuition of that public high school. If they go to a private or independent school, we are capped at the state average. And I believe this year it's $18,342. And that has been steadily going up.
So, like for that, it's a combination of increase in students and increase in costs per.
I think when we did the merger back in 2018, I think they used $16,000 as a base. We were way above that.
And then I guess you had the 116 increase in the HRE reserve. That's primarily for the furnace. I'm just looking at the your budget, not looking at the RSU budget. In other words, Board of Ed HRA reserve.
Oh, so that is capital reserve? So that's the 400,000. The majority of that is the 400,000 for capital reserves to either use for the bond or to use for the furnace.
And then I guess the special ed, because you got more of them, or they're charging you more, or you had higher one.
Both. Our trial count is 264 and it was 242 last year.
I'm sorry.
264 students in our special ed child count.
We have a total
Oh,
of,
that's district-wide, I'm
that's,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's SUI.
Yeah.
SUI. Yeah. So that and the cost of transporting some of our students, and that cost is extremely high.
And the cost for the services that, if we have students who are being provided services outside of what we have in our schools already, sometimes for, outside OT or occupational therapy or physical therapy, and the costs, not all of those providers are people we employ. So those costs go up, and the cost of the transportation for students who we're either sending for outplacement or sometimes needing to provide transportation that is not on our regular school buses, those costs just keep rising.
And since Ludlow is, I forget which program, special ed, for the whole TRSU district, I'm assuming they just give you certain pieces of funding.
So those are actually TRSU programs, and they are in the TRSU budget, not in the Ludlow-Mount Holly budget. There is rent that PRSU pays to Ludlow, so you'll see a revenue in there to help with the offset the cost of the
Balances
maintenance.
out. And then the maintenance went up 435,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that the bond? Is that the payment on the bond?
Maintenance, 2610, whatever that is.
Let me look at it a different way.
It went from 600,000 to a mil, up 435,000. Might be needed. Or was that because maintenance in the past was underfunded?
Was the $400,000 part of the first department?
No, that's on the other section. I think that's in
So
the
that's where the
HRA reserve, I think.
That's where the capital reserve is.
Yeah, when you pull that up under the district, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so I'm
the
sorry, that's where the capital
106
reserve money is, the 400,000 for the capital reserve,
Right.
that's the line that's in.
Oh, it was in maintenance, not
It's
in
in
the HRA
maintenance.
reserve.
So what
Okay.
was, yeah, it shows up as the capital reserve in one of the other charts.
So the HRA reserve, the line you're looking at is 116,000.
Yeah, the increase, not the,
Correct.
yeah.
And that has to do with the assessment, so the central office assessment. So the TRSU budget, we are funded by the districts.
Right.
And so we do that by assessing them back. And because of the change that we made to technology and we're restructuring it, that's an increase to the,
So that's why like we went down 70, but
correct, technology went down.
right,
But
yeah, so the
that's-
70,000 basically got moved into the 116, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Question? You can come, we're good.
So I wondered about the use of 497,000 of fund balance. Didn't have any in this year's budget.
Right, so we had, because we had budgeted the 284 in 23, and we didn't have anything to budget for 24, then we didn't use 23, and we had surplus in 20. Didn't use it in 23 and had a surplus in 23. So then we ended up with a 497.
Next year's budget could be zero.
Could be.
That would be made up by,
So we need to look at that differently.
The actual for 22, 23 is only about 200,000. The profit, if you will, or yeah, income versus expense. Something that on 21, 22, 200,000 the other way, for lack of a better way to push.
Back to my spreadsheet, and look at that. I don't have that spreadsheet with me, so I can't break it down.
Well, I'm just doing it based on.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I have to go back to my numbers to be able to calculate it out for you. And I don't have that with me.
She'll look at it. She'll look at it, we'll get the answer to you.
David?
I guess 22, 23 is, I guess, a projected actually. It's actually through December and projected for the next 6 months.
That's what it's been 2 years.
I just have to look at it, like, I can't get into it right now.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I left. Eric left from the
No,
EEI.
no, he was,
Oh, he's on the phone. So next up was gonna be the bond
do
presentation
we have any other questions?
for the budget. And then the bond
We'll
presentation. But
get an answer for you. But not right now. And of course, as soon as Eric leaves.
Right.
Of course. It's labor. Coming back. We didn't find it. I don't know that I have a summary.
Take a recess.
Yeah, take a few minutes to get on.
Maybe during this time, on the ballot, like I've seen some absentee ballots, it's very confusing how the bond issue is asked twice.
I haven't seen
I
it
haven't
now.
seen the ballot.
That's a cool question.
They're both, they're about the same amounts, both of them.
It looked like it was asked twice.
Looks like the budget was asked once and there was two questions about the bond.
Yeah.
$9 million.
Yes.
Maybe it's just the bond is the second one. It's the same, close to the same number.
Well, they're pretty close to the same number.
That's what-
Yeah, they're really close. They are.
Yeah, I think that's
You sure it is? Because I know the people won't know.
But it looks like it's the same thing, you're asking for twice.
You're talking about how the
That could be
numbers lined up
confusing.
exactly the same almost?
Right,
Yeah.
for the, and on the ballot.
Something to that.
Oh.
Oh, yes, yes. Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Lafayette with the EEI. I recognize a lot of you from some earlier meetings in the month. So I'll try to be pretty quick because I know you guys probably still have a lot to talk about. We're based out of Williston, Vermont. So I'm from South Burlington. We have a main office in Merrimack. We've been working with schools around New England for the last 20 years. We've been working at Springfield for the last probably 3 or 4 years specifically. Our first project was down in Bennington, in Vermont. It was in Bennington about 8 years ago. We did Mill River about 5 years ago, maybe. And Virgins about 4 years ago. And since then, we're probably working with about 10 other districts around the city in similar capacities. Timeline, the SU selected us as their performance contracting company back in, I think, 2022. This is 2023. But we've been working, we've had analysis done on both schools. We brought architects through, mechanical, electrical engineers, structural engineers. And what we wanted to do was really have a focus on energy efficiency and look at your guys' HVAC systems, lighting systems, and building envelope. While we were there doing a lot of that analysis, we picked up on a lot of other needs at the schools in conversations with Craig and more, Deb and the prior principal, which also showed that there was some space issues specifically at Mount Holly, which also comes up in the project as well. And then really over the last year, year and a half, we've been working with the school board and then the facilities task force specifically to come up with a scope of work that addresses a lot of the main infrastructure concerns at both schools, as well as addressing some of the classroom finishes and upgrades to the actual learning experience for the kids. So going back, at this point, we've developed schematic drawings on both buildings. So we've done permit reviews at both schools. We've reviewed them with local fire marshals. We've applied and received wood heat grants. We reviewed water requirements, land requirements, stormwater retention requirements. And really, we used all that information to kind of determine or provide that information to the school board so they can make a good recommendation on what to put towards this bond. Our goal as an organization is we really don't want to leave like any stone unturned. We don't want to get to the finish line and somebody in the community says, oh, did you think about doing like a geothermal system? Or what about solar? Or what about this? So we really try to look at all the different renewable energy options out there and really try to match up the best technology for what your guys' existing conditions are and really what the goals for the district where you want to be. So some of our audit findings, specifically here at Ludlow, you guys have a roof that has failed. About 25% of the roof has already failed. We did an infrared scan of the roof that shows that a lot of that insulation has already received water damage. That insulation will need to get replaced. The remaining insulation that hasn't been damaged yet, we're actually able to reuse that and add additional insulation to bring it up to current code. Right now, you guys have under R20 for insulation. Current code is R40. So this project would bring the building insulation up to current standards. Heating systems at both schools are either at end of life or failing. Specifically at Mount Holly School, you guys have a single oil-fired boiler over there. That one, it's a cast iron boiler. It's about 30 years old. The oil tank, I believe, is even older than that. And that is well past its age to be replaced. Being that there's only one boiler, there's no redundancy, and being that it's end of life, there is that risk if it fails, the school would not be able to operate without heat. On top of it, the Mount Holly School is overcrowded. I think that's pretty evident with pictures. The nurse's office is located on the stage, which blocks the ADA access or the wheelchair access to actually get onto the stage. Physical and occupational therapy classes are held in the cafeteria, as well as speech therapy. Both schools are lacking ADA or American with Disability Act requirements, so wheelchair access to all areas of the school, being able to access drinking fountains and sinks inside of classrooms. Currently, both schools are extremely lacking the ADA requirements. And a lot of it's just due to the age of the schools and being that they haven't been renovated for 30 plus years. Those ADA requirements have changed over time. Inadequate ventilation. So there's areas of the schools that have no outside air. So literally the air that you're breathing inside of the space does not get changed over at all through the day. This space, currently being one of them right now, has no outside air ventilation to it, which really impedes the learning environment of kids and increases CO2, makes people sleepy to some extent. I don't think we see that at all in this meeting right now. Life safety issues. You guys have fire alarm systems that are past useful life. Secured entrances at both schools, meaning double locked doors, being able to go to a single administrator at the front to be able to be buzzed into the rest of the school and actually being able to physically see all of your surroundings. So some of that involves a rework to the entryway here at Ludlow, as well as replacing doors at both schools with new door access controls as well. Specifically the Ludlow Elementary School roof. This is just showing one of the areas that were marked out with spray paint as being wet and being damaged. And this is showing some of the pooling that's happening up on the roof as well. This just goes into the infrared analysis, but just saying that about 25% of your roof has already seen failure. And really why I bring that up specifically is that the decking material that you guys use below the insulation, so your roof is a system. Usually there's the actual structural steel that holds up a deck. That deck then holds insulation, and then you have your rubber membrane on top, and that's really your roof system. In this case, your insulation has gotten wet, and the decking material that you guys use is called the Tectum decking. It's like almost like a fiberglass cement board material that if it gets wet, it could actually impede the structural integrity of that, and you might have to replace it. Whereas traditional today, all the decking they use today is like a corrugated metal, like 18 gauge metal decking. So the reason why they use this Tectum decking is because it's cheaper, it's lighter, and at the time it was more readily available than the steel. So we would be evaluating all the decking underneath and replacing it as needed under this project. This is just showing some of the imaging. The images on the bottom left shows roofs that have not failed. That little green dot that you see in the middle, that's a roof drain, so that's where water would leave the roof. The image in the middle, that shows where the actual insulation has water damage to it and has lost all of its insulation properties. So we would be removing that roof and replacing it. We'd be installing a new rubber membrane roof that meets current code, and then we would be, that would come with a 20-year manufacturer warranty on top of it.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is there a reason you're not putting a pitched roof on instead of a flat roof?
Pitched roofs are very expensive to be able to modify and have
No,
that.
they don't fail the way these guys do. We had to replace the one in Mount Hollywood. We put a pitched roof on it. We haven't had to do anything with it since.
I would say typically today on new school construction, you're seeing more flat roofs than you are pitched roofs. I would say in the 80s and 90s, they like went through a lot of the schools in the state and added pitched roofs to them. I don't know specifically why they did it. I think it was because the existing roofs were under insulated, and then they were also snow loading requirements have changed over
If I
time.
remember correctly, we used to have people go up on the roof and shovel it off.
Okay. Yeah, so anything, obviously any flat roof that we would put in would have to be current code, which is 50 pounds per square foot for snow load. Getting into the boilers at each building, Ludlow boilers here at this school are from 1972. There are two of them, so they do have backup, which is, I think, what Lauren was mentioning before. They're not as critical as the Mount Holly boiler, which has already seen multiple failures. There is only one boiler over there, so if it fails, there is no backup system. And then on top of it, all of these boilers and heating systems run off what's called a pneumatic control system, which is like an air-based control system that went obsolete in the early 90s. There's only a few people in the state that still work on them. One of them, I think his name is Gaylord, and he's about 80-something years old, and his son is taking it over. He's very talented, but is a lack of knowledge of younger people coming in that are familiar with it. And then on top of it, the pneumatic system doesn't allow for a lot of the energy efficiency setbacks at night, being able to shut down controls during snow breaks, snow days, and school vacations. So just it's limited in its control ability. And then just being the fact that parts are no longer available for it, it's tough to maintain as well. So at Mount Holly School, we'd be looking at installing a remote boiler room similar to what you see in this picture. This is a remote boiler room with silo that we installed over at Tunbridge this past summer. This has been up in operation through this winter. And really the idea here would be that we'd be offsetting existing fossil fuel, which is currently burning number 2 fuel oil. We'd be offsetting that with a pellet system, so wood pellets as your primary heat source. Your secondary heat source would be new LP propane condensing boilers. So part of this project is removing the existing underground fuel oil tanks, installing new LP tanks that would be owned by the school that would allow the school to competitively price the LP on a yearly basis. And then we would be removing obviously the oil from the schools. Nice things about this is actual wood pellets and wood chips. Studies have shown that 80% of the cost of that fuel stays within a 60-mile radius of the school. So a lot of the wood that would get sourced specific to burn and heat these schools is going to be coming from Vermont or New Hampshire. And actually the people that supply it to the schools are locals. So it's really a local energy engine for the community. And the state of Vermont recognizes it, and that's why they give out grants for schools to be able to convert to wood chip. The other nice thing about wood pellets and wood chip is that as an energy source, it's a lot more stable of a price from a commodity standpoint, where oil and gas have seen some big fluctuations in the last few years due to world politics. Wood really has a pretty steady price point, and really the variations in their cost has to do with essentially the gas that's used to transport it to the site on a weekly basis. So also part of this project is removing the unit ventilators. So classroom unit ventilators are units that are mounted in the wall in each one of the classrooms. It has a damper to the outside that allows outside air to come into the classroom. And then it's heating that air to 90 degrees to be able to heat the space. Exhaust fans are located on the roof that balances the pressure, right? Because in every building, if you're bringing outside air in, you have to exhaust air or actually pressurizing the building too much. And there's no energy recovery. So in a building like in any classroom that you guys have now, you guys might be bringing in around 200 CFM of outside air. And then you were exhausting that same amount right up through an exhaust fan, going right out the building. And there's no way to capture that energy right now, which is very inefficient, which we would update with new energy recovery ventilators. LED lighting. So fluorescent lighting is throughout both schools. This project would be replacing all the lights with new LED lighting, which will reduce your guys' lighting energy by about 75 or 80%. And will reduce your guys' electric bills at these schools by about 20%. So the nice thing, a lot of the lights that you guys have right now are what they call like these pendant lights, where they're actually hanging below the ceiling grid right now. The fluorescent lighting has a tendency to flicker. They're not as consistent. And on top of it, it's just not there's no ability to really dim the lighting. The new lights that we go in would be essentially be integral to the ceiling tiles. A lot of your spaces are over-lamped, meaning that there's too many lights. Like in here, you guys, especially in this room, you could use probably about half the amount of lights that you guys have right now. And then with the new LED technology, you can dim them up or dim them down depending on the activity you guys are doing inside the space. Electrical and fire alarm upgrades, and these are, the last few items that we were talking about are specific to both schools. A lot of the infrastructure needs at Ludlow are the same at Mount Holly as well. Electrical upgrades at both schools. So both of your schools do not have enough electrical capacity for the new heat pump dehumidification ventilation units that we'd be putting at the schools. And then really we'd be making sure that we size any electrical capacity for the future of getting off of fossil fuels or biomass. Right now, technology isn't really there to completely transfer you guys to like a heat pump hot water system. That technology is coming, and we just want to make sure that any electrical service that we size for both of these schools will be able to take on the future HVAC in 20 years from now, when this existing equipment that we're replacing is getting banned of life. So here at Ludlow, we'd be getting rid of the 3 separate electrical entrances and going to one central main distribution panel. And this is really a code issue as well. And then we'd be reworking a lot of the old Romex wiring that's found above the drop ceilings as well. A new addressable fire alarm system with voice UDAC, another ADA requirement, and then replacing all the devices throughout the school. Ventilation, dehumidification, and heat pumps. So this is what we had talked about, curbing or offsetting some of your guys' fossil fuel heat with electric heat pumps. And we do this through the central ventilation system. So these would be units that we would place up on the roof, very similar to what you see in this picture. That picture is from Spalding High School. And that unit would essentially be able to provide heat to your classrooms, as well as all of your outside air and exhaust air. And the benefit of that is, as you guys are exhausting air out of the classrooms, you guys are transferring that 70-degree temperature state from the space into the outside air. So instead of heating, 5 or -5 degree air in the wintertime, you guys are heating 45, 50 degree air through your energy recovery. And this really replaces heating systems that are 30 plus years old. So a lot of these unit ventilators that you see at Ludlow and Mount Holly are from 70s and 80s. It's really a technology that has been around for quite some time. When energy was cheap, people liked them because they're easy to put in, and then on top of it, they're somewhat low maintenance compared to other equipment. But the problem with that is that they just use an exorbitant amount of energy to be able to do the job that they're supposed to do. So really, you don't see anybody adding new unit ventilators to the buildings today. On top of it, you get decreased classroom noise, and then you have verifiable airflow through the space. So through variable air volume box, we're actually able to monitor and directly put the amount of ventilation into the classroom that's needed, depending on the people in there. And that's called demand control ventilation. So we're not ventilating spaces that don't need that don't need to be ventilated because there's nobody. Specifically here at Ludlow Elementary School, replacement of windows. There's a lot of original windows to the school, single pane windows that are well past their useful life. Specifically the older section of the building, and these windows are looking out into the cafeteria / gymnasium. And these windows are single pane. A lot of them have seen some temporary repairs. In this case, they've blocked off portions of it with blank panels to prevent some natural light coming into the space. Mount Holly Building Addition. So this is a major component, obviously, of the bond, being that there's not enough space for a lot of the support services that are needed in schools today. This would be a new addition that's going to come off from the corridor over by the art room. The new addition is going to house essentially a flex classroom, as well as OT PT space, the nurse's office, and then a few small offices that would get removed in order to build the ADA required corridor to the new addition. So that's what's shown here in this drawing here, but you'd have essentially a dedicated music or flex room classroom at the top of that you see at the top of the screen. The nurse's station would also be located in there, and then 3 dedicated support service offices that are currently located in kind of the corridor. Those offices somehow fit right now in this corridor, which is really tight. So this is just showing an image of the current cafeteria. These temporary walls are put up to provide those support services. Makes it very difficult to provide the teaching that we need to for our young students today. A lot of these kids are in these support services because they do have trouble concentrating. Being in these kind of loud, open environments is not really the optimal environment for doing these special teachings and assessments for students at Mount Holly. And then on top of it, you guys have a nurse's office that's undersized, doesn't have proper bathrooms or sinks to be able to clean, and really doesn't have that dedicated space in case you do have a sick student that needs to be isolated from the rest of the population. Siding at Mount Holly. So you guys have a portion of your guys' school that utilizes cement block as your guys' exterior wall. And what has happened specifically in those first 2 classrooms as you walk into Mount Holly on your left-hand side is the building is actually running under a negative, and you can see moisture is being sucked through the cement. So a cement block wall is not an air or vapor barrier. So there's no actual air or water barrier on the exterior of your building. And if your building's running a negative, meaning that you're running more exhaust than you are bringing in from outside air, it can actually suck in the moisture from the outside of the building through the cement, and it can get into the interior of the building. That's what's happened in this case. You can actually see some of the salt and effervescence that's been pulled through that cement block. And under this project, we would actually build a proper exterior wall. So we would keep the existing block wall that they have now, but we would just build out on it. So we would fur it out, add new insulation, and then put new siding, new water and air vapor barrier, and then we would redo all the interiors of those 2 classrooms to mitigate any moisture that may have gotten through over the years. That same kind of detail is shown over on the cafeteria as well, and then that wall would get upgraded as well. And then select upgrades to the exterior, some vinyl upgrades and some miscellaneous painting to really make sure that the perimeter and building envelope at Mount Holly is intact. This is showing that same kind of finishing some of that siding over by the cafeteria. This is showing that where the new addition would be located. So there'd have to be some rework to the existing playground, adding a new pump station to be able to bring the waste back to the existing septic tank, and then reutilizing the existing leach field. And then due to the size of this new addition, we're just under that threshold that requires stormwater retention. So we're not going to trigger essentially that 3-acre rule that the state is required for stormwater. We purposely kept the addition just below that to avoid those costs. So upgrades at Ludlow Elementary School. So really it's addressing some of the building finishes inside of the space as well as some of the smaller bathrooms. This is showing some of the windows that are going to be getting replaced, and it's not a full-blown replace all the windows through Ludlow Elementary. It's really addressing some of your guys' biggest need windows. So windows that have failed through their seals as well as some of the single pane windows that you guys have in the original part of the school. So also part of this project, these 5-6 classrooms that are along the perimeter of your guys' parking lot, these are the rooms that have no ventilation along with the classrooms along here. So these are going to see more of a major renovation. It also includes expanding the bathrooms. So these existing classrooms have just a single toilet stall. There's no hand sink inside of them. And they're, if you're a full-grown adult, when you go to sit down, your knees are about hitting the wall. Being that these are for the older kids, we'd be expanding these bathrooms to meet current size standards for today, and then adding a sink inside of them, and really making these ADA bathrooms and making the whole spaces compliant for American with Disability Act. It also includes reworking the front entry. So currently your guys' administration is here towards the center of the building, which doesn't give any access or line of sight to see who's entering the building. So under this project, we'd be relocating the principal and then the reception, redoing the secured entrance here. So as people come into this double set of doors, they would get essentially buzzed in through this double set of doors. They'd be able to talk to your front desk administration here through a secured window, and then essentially be buzzed through this door while this double set of doors is locked behind you. And this is really the secured entrances that the AOE in the state of Vermont is pushing for schools today. Other improvements include replacing cabinetry in pretty much all the classrooms, redoing the ceilings, and then redoing the ventilation in the classrooms as well. Still showing some of the window replacements, just a different view. This is now on the playground side of the building. And then getting into cost, improvement cost on the project. And what we tried to do is lump these together because, as I mentioned before, a lot of the needs that are at Ludlow are the same needs that you see at Mount Holly. So we have your HVAC, your heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, which is your wood pellet boilers, ventilation and controls, about $2.8 million in cost on that. Electrical upgrades to the schools, just shy of $900,000. Roof replacement specific to Ludlow, just over $1 million. The Mount Holly edition of $1.4 million. And then fire alarm and secured entrances. And then these are really kind of code and security issues at both schools of $745,000. LED lighting of $266,000. Siding, building envelope, and window improvements of $334,000. Interior finish upgrades, so that's doing the floors, the ceilings, the painting, and really making those spaces freshened up for today's learning environments of $1.2 million. And then having a project contingency of around $468,000 to address any increased cost over the past year of putting this together. This is showing the debt service. So I know originally the last kind of 2 times that we presented, Vermont Bond Bank was projecting a little about 4.1% of a bond. Interest rates have come down a little bit. The thing about Vermont Bond Bank is you never know what the exact interest rate is until they actually pool all these bonds up and go out to see if someone's going to purchase them. But they're projecting now a 3.66% interest rate on it. So it is almost a full, like a half a point drop from where we were just a month ago. So what will this look like? It's going to be a 20-year bond. You're looking at an interest rate of around 3.66%. You'd be looking at an annual increase of about $292 for a $250,000 assessed home value, which equates to about $117 per $100,000 assessed home value. But what are you getting out of this? You guys are really getting completely renovated buildings. You're getting essentially all new HVAC systems that are really designed for the 21st century. That's going to move you guys off from number 2 oil and being your primary heating source of fossil fuels. So you're looking at significant CO2 reductions, security upgrades at both schools, really creating the secured entrances, and then improving the programming here at both schools to ensure that teachers and everybody are using the new secured entrances as well as key fobs to access the school. Code compliance, bringing these schools up to essentially 21st century. So one thing I didn't jump into was pretty extensive bathroom renovations at both schools. So the main men's and women's bathrooms at both schools would be essentially completely gutted and redone for ADA purposes as well. And those are really dated. Life safety, so fire alarm, addressable panels, secured entrances, voice evacuation, those would both be updated at both schools. The improved learning environments, I think that was something that was really pushed for by the school board, is that if we're going to do this infrastructure upgrade, and this is that, kind of one time in 20 years they have an opportunity to do a bond, they really want to make sure that the learning environments for the students were improved at the same time, because those have been lacked and have not seen the investment that they should over time. And then proper learning spaces for today's learning. So as I mentioned, the needs of students today and what the state has asked for the educators in regards to special education has really changed in the last 10 years, and making sure that we have the spaces to be able to provide those for the students. And we've already received the State of Vermont Wood Heat Grant for $250,000. There's another grant that's going to be submitting on in another month, hopefully to be able, or another week or so, I'll let you know about. That hopefully will be getting, that will also go towards this. I'm keeping an eye out on all state and federal grants. So if I see anything that could apply for you, I'm working with Cheryl and your guys' board to hopefully get that money to apply for these projects as well. And that's it. So that was pretty quick. That was like 25 minutes. Thanks.
What's the timeline for the work, start to finish?
We would be substantially complete by September of 2025. And I would say that we'd be 100% complete by December 30, by the end of 2025. So by what I would anticipate is if this bond passes in March, then we would first address some of the heating issues or the major concerns first, potentially addressing maybe half of the roof at Ludlow this winter, depending on what we see for availability. So what we would do is I would work.
Can somebody, thank you.
No, not.
No.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, so what I would need to do is I would work essentially with Todd and the facilities directors at each of these schools. We break the project up into a bunch of bid packages, and then I really would essentially try to work with different local subcontractors in the area to see, if these projects fit within their timeline, and really we try to match up bid packages with what's available for subcontractors. If it doesn't make sense to try to fit the roofs in the summer, then we would wait till next year, but we would be done by end of next year for sure.
Just like before, I got a few questions.
That's fine.
The grant you're talking about for the pellet, that's baked into your bond, right?
Currently, right now, yes.
Okay. The Mount Holly has a PFC issue.
The PFAs.
PFA, sorry.
Yes.
That's going to be part of the address or not?
That is not part of this bond.
Being addressed separately.
Yeah, I don't think they could address it, but I was just going to ask.
Yes.
But at one point you had said the wish list started at 16 million and worked down to 9. So what was deferred?
On the original 16 million,
Solar panels.
yeah, solar was definitely one of them. Windows throughout both schools, I think that was definitely on there. Kitchen upgrades at Mount Holly, I know that one was on there. I would have to go back, and it was about a year plus ago. I haven't looked at it, but this addresses what we felt was the major infrastructure needs. Because some of the items that got cut was additional renovations to administration space through here. Originally, we had renovating like this room, the locker rooms over here to make those usable space, the art room. So we kind of took a lot of the non-classroom areas out of the project because for cost purposes, we just couldn't renovate everything. So
And then with the wheelchair, that's because it's required under ADA, because I'm sort of questioning whether you have any students with wheelchairs or teachers.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's when you get to a certain threshold of building renovation, the federal law makes you do these updates.
Okay, and I guess why are you, doing a 20-year bond instead of 30-year, or does it have anything to do with pellet furnaces, having a 20-year useful life?
Correct.
Trying to match it.
That is, I mean, I would anticipate that if this stuff was well maintained, you're going to get more than 20 years out of it. But essentially, you should be matching a bond timeline up with the life expectancy of the equipment and the stuff that you're putting into it.
So would there be any other equipment that might be a 30-year life?
Under this project, where there's stuff that we already
Furnaces, yeah. But you're talking about like at Mount Holly doing a propane backup to a pellet furnace.
Correct, yep.
So propane has what kind of useful life?
Same thing, right around that 20-year period.
Excuse me, Eric. I thought when you had the informational meeting up in Mount Holly that you said that the grant for the wood pellet was not approved for Mount Holly, but for Ludlow.
It was the opposite. It was approved for Mount Holly, but not.
No.
Was it Ludlow, not Mount Holly? Okay, so I take that
Has
back.
it changed?
It has not changed.
It has not changed.
No, but we are
So the
applying, and there's 2
pellet-
additional ones. There's more grants coming out by the state, and we're in
Okay,
contact
so we
with
just don't actually have a grant approved for doing the pellet stove in Mount Holly
at this time. So what I would anticipate,
And if you don't get one?
if we don't get one, then we would move forward with the propane boiler install, and then I would continue to apply for that, which I do feel confident from eventually. They've continuously put it out, direct contact with the person who's administering it from the state. And there is another rolling application period here in a few more days that we're going to be applying for again. So
So I know you're not the architect, but an idea came up to me after you had the meeting. In Mount Holly, rather than putting the nurse's station in the new addition with a bathroom attached, instead putting the principal in the new addition and putting the nurse down where the principal's office is, where there is a bathroom right there.
yep,
Has that been considered?
it was, yep. And Craig, I know we had another design review meeting with the principal and with our architect. And, really, if we want to make that change, we could make those, adjustments. But based on what I
Because
saw,
doing the plumbing for the new addition for that nurse's station is gonna be costly.
yes, it is. It is.
And if we already have a bathroom available, it would cut that cost out.
I think we're close to finalizing that plan, and we might relocate that bathroom from that new addition. That can come up in this conversation.
If they consider, I'm going to call it the OT, PT, and all the other special ed requirements, sharing offices as much as they're part-time at both schools?
I know there was a pretty substantial programming review that was done with the principal and then with the architect, Andrew from Banwell. And I know that's always the first thing that they do is they talk about stacking or staggering essentially the support services to utilize the same spaces.
To some point, they're already doing the sharing.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not really privy. That would be a better question, right?
I'm still hyped up over trailers instead of building a new building at Mount Holly. Because if you're doing it for offices, they come with kitchens and everything else built in. However, when you're doing the Ludlow Electric, is that covering the high school also?
It's not.
They're cash.
Yeah, it'd be separate.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, I know, there's just a bunch of stuff here. So, with the changes that just last summer. So
I have a question. This was asked of me by some teachers that couldn't answer it. They were asking about bathrooms in the old section that are going to get renovated.
Yes.
That are in the classroom, about how much space it would take up, and are they ADA?
yes, they are ADA bathrooms that we would be installing in there. And really the space that they would be taking up would be, so Currently, it would really kind of just be impeding on existing cabinet space that you guys have.
Oh, okay.
So they would be,
It's near the cabinet, so.
it's going towards the cabinets and it's gonna be pulled out probably about 2 feet. But I mean, the general location is gonna, the toilet location is gonna remain the same. It's just both walls have to get pushed out like 2.5 feet and 2 feet to make that space. Yeah.
Got that, Lisa?
I don't think it's gonna, it shouldn't really impact that space a whole lot. The way that it's currently set up.
That's what, that, they were just concerned of losing classroom space, so. If we could clarify that. a little.
Yeah, so yeah, it would be the 3 classrooms that are along the parking lot side, essentially releasing the upgrades. And then we would also be looking at doing some improvements to the bathrooms down here.
Right.
As well.
So there's a legal requirement that each classroom be ADA compliant for
There's,
the bathroom?
there's not a legal requirement that says that each ADA, but it is that if you're doing an upgrade to a school and you're adding a bathroom to it, then that should be an ADA bathroom. So if you're gonna have a bathroom inside of a classroom, it's supposed to be an ADA. Is that, it should be a bathroom.
But using your argument is ADA or adult need to use a bathroom in the classroom, it's, the space is much too small, but if they go down the hall, rather than, because the kids are gonna be using the bathroom more than the adults, I would think, or the
Yep.
teachers.
I think the biggest issue specifically on these bathrooms, like, I mean,
They are tiny.
tiny,
Tiny, and 6th graders get pretty big. Yeah.
and there's no hand sink, which is pretty gross. So they have to like use the bathroom, leave the bathroom, walk out.
Yeah.
Yeah, open and close the door, yeah.
So there would be a sink in that bathroom as well?
Oh, yeah, full sink and everything, yep. Paper towel dispenser, soap dispenser, all the stuff that you want in the bathroom.
Bonus.
That's just don't have the boys in the wedding side.
Yes. You'll never fix that
They
problem.
tend to leave.
That will never get fixed, fortunately.
After our school.
We all good?
Any other questions?
I would just like to answer 2 questions that came up before. Well, 1 question. If you look in the ClearGov, the notes or the minutes for the last year's meeting, the full minutes are in there. They've got it shut up. So
There are no corrections needed.
And as far as the carryover, I think when we did the budget, I didn't have the finalized audit. But our audit, with 223, the difference is 214,000 plus the 283,000 from the prior year. I have 284 in the budget, but it's actually 283, comes to your 497. Good, David?
It's budgeted to be done.
It's budgeted, well, that's what the law says, but we have to put it back to the taxpayers when we get it.
It is very confusing to say we're going to use surplus to pay this budget. But when the year is all done, you didn't use it. You didn't use it. You actually had a surplus in the year. Now you've magnified.
Right, but also if we do end up needing to spend it, the budget ends up in a deficit in order to spend that budget, which everybody panics. That's the way this is.
That's when you shouldn't deficit spend, just do it out.
Okay, David.
My email is on the slide. My cell phone is on our website. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Todd has my contact information, so I'll share them.
So on the TRSU website, there is a bond folder. So all Eric's information in this PowerPoint. This PowerPoint will be there tomorrow, but there's other information in there.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. See you guys.
Judy has something to say.
So I just want to thank our fearless chairperson who is getting onto the board. This is his last public appearance with us, and he's done a huge amount of work, and I just wanted to thank him.
It's fun, I enjoy it. Now it's off to my kids, so.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, no problem.
You need a motion.
No, we're good.
You're looking for a motion to adjourn from someone, aren't you?
That's what I thought.
You're looking for a motion to adjourn from
Adjourn,
someone.
yeah.
Adjourn.
We have to motion to adjourn. I'll do it.
Let's do it, Jared. Second my day.
All right.
Jordan, 7:40.